On this channel, I try to cover the rarest of the rare when it comes to cars, the classics that you really never see or hear about. But the downside of this is that when a car is super rare, it tends to be super expensive just based on supply and demand. And we have all seen the prices of our favorite muscle cars rise meteorically over the past few years. And I'm sure a lot of us are thinking the same thing. Well, I can't afford that now. So I wanted to go on a hunt to find what I believe are the 6 best classic muscle cars that you can consistently buy today in very solid running and driving condition with a budget of no more than $20,000. To prove that getting a classic American muscle car with that V8 grunt can still be achieved by the everyman if you look hard enough and a bit outside the box. And these were the rules for my search. The cars had to be 1981 or earlier model years. They had to have came with a V8 option from the factory, and they have to routinely sell for under $20,000 in solid driver quality condition. This means no real rot, presentable paint, and a solid drivetrain. And they also have to have some aftermarket support. Now, I'm going to pre-warn you, these cars are not going to be vehicles like the B-body Mopars or your '69 Camaros. We have to make compromises at this price point. But based on those criteria, here are the 6 classics that I found. Number 1, the 1973 to 1974 Chevy Nova. Now, the 73 to 74 Novas get a lot of hate primarily due to their impact bumpers, which I will concede do look significantly worse than the pre-facelift 68 to 72 Novas. But the kicker is that underneath, these are basically the exact same car. Heck, even some of the body panels are virtually the same, and the proportions are very similar. But because of the less desirable bumpers, these cars are considerably cheaper than the early ones. Granted, the 73 to 74 Novas never came with a big block stock, so the biggest engine you could find in one of these was a choked out small block 350 from the factory. But a rebuild or motor swap to another more rowdy small block would be an easy way to add performance to one of these budget muscle cars. And lucky for us, since the 73 and 74 cars shared the chassis with the earlier Novas, that means that most aftermarket suspension components that were designed for the GM X-Body platform can fit on this car as well. So if you wanted to do a full build on one of these, you certainly could, with the kits available from Hotchkiss for suspension, brake kits from Baer, and various parts from other brands. And if you can't stand the look of the front or rear end of these cars, don't worry, because there are plenty of forum write-ups about guys who totally undid the facelift and backdated the front and rear of these Novas to the 1972 model year look. You can pretty routinely find these cars listed for the high teens to the $20,000 range in very clean running and driving order for a 2-door coupe with a V8. And while these are more expensive than the 75 to 79 Novas that followed them, those are really cheap right now, I do think that most people would agree in saying that the 73 to 74 cars do still retain that hint of the muscle car era that the 75 cars did away with. They will never be as desirable as the 68 to 72 Novas are, and if you're looking to buy a project car to restore, it's almost certainly better to buy one of the earlier cars because it would have a higher residual value when it was completed. But if you want an affordable driver, the 73 and 74 are a much more affordable alternative. Number 2, the 1967 to 1976 Dodge Dart. While the modern Dodge Darts are some of the saddest excuses for an economy car out there, the old school Darts had some serious swag to them. The squared off 67 to 76 Darts, while they were cheap back in the day, they still do have that classic Mopar attitude, just at a more entry-level price. The 67 to 69 Darts are the most desirable of this generation, as that's the body style also associated with the Hemi Superstock Darts. Now, it's going to be very difficult to find a clean running and driving V8 one of these for under $20K. But if you need to have this body style, you can still definitely find a clean slant 6 powered one in the 10 to low teens range. Moving up in the years, we have the 70 to 72 Darts. These are the post-facelift cars that came along with the introduction of the highly popular Dodge Dart Swinger. The extremely squared off fascias were now replaced for ones that were a bit more angular. Underneath though, the cars were virtually identical. From the factory, these could be had with a 318 or a 340 small block. Now, finding a factory 340 Swinger Dart that's clean for under 20K is pretty much off the list of possibilities as well. But a 318 car, or a car that retroactively had a 340 or a 360 put into it, can definitely be had for 20K or less. And if you move up to a 73 to 76 Dart, then those get even cheaper because of their impact bumpers. They were available with a 318, a 340, and a 360. So even if you're on a shoestring budget, you could still probably find a clean late 318 car for about 10 grand. And that gives you ample room for upgrades since the aftermarket parts are still available to improve the driving experience of these darts. They are a mean but affordable entry into the increasingly pricey classic Mopar world. Number 3, the 1970 to 1977 Ford Maverick. Ah, the Maverick, the Ford economy car successor to the Falcon. These are some of the most slept-on classics available on the market right now because you can even find a pretty clean V8 swapped Maverick for under 20 grand. And the kicker is that you could even get a 1970 to 1972 Maverick in this price range, which means you would be getting the desirable small bumpers. Realistically, you're not going to be getting a factory 4-speed 302 Maverick Grabber for this price, but since the car was available with the V8 from the factory, it does technically make the cutoff for this list. With a curb weight of around 2,600 pounds, this is also the lightest car on the docket. So even with a mild 302 inside, one of these should be plenty fun to party with. Aftermarket suspension and braking components are available as well as a decent selection of restoration parts. I think this is probably the best looking entry on the list of all the cars, and I really can't see you going wrong with buying a clean one of these and enjoying it as is. Even though these were cheap economy cars new, I think their handsome looks will always give them some residual value and cool factor for the tie-in to the Maverick Grabbers. Number 4, the 1971 to 1974 AMC Javelin. Now, I was surprised that you could find the later model AMC Javelins pretty much all day long in driver quality condition for the mid to high teens. These are certainly what I would consider to be one of the most unique cars on the list, and, well, how often do you actually see an AMC car these days at all? The 71 to 74 Javelins with their swoopy front fenders have a bit of a polarizing style, but that's part of what makes them so unique versus the others. In terms of V8s, these could be equipped with an AMC 304, 360, or a 401 cubic inch motor. Now, you're probably not going to be able to get a factory 401 car for under 20 grand that's clean, but a 304 or 360 powered car is certainly doable in this price range. Aftermarket parts are available to upgrade these AMC motors to squeeze out some extra oomph, but there is nowhere near the selection of parts available for these cars as there are for Ford, GM, or Chrysler products, and the same goes for suspension and overall restoration parts. You can find them, it's just going to be a lot harder for an AMC car than anything from the big three. But the second you sit inside one of these with their crazy cool wraparound gauge cluster and you see those big fenders poking up in front of you, that suddenly doesn't seem like that big of an issue anymore. If you're looking for a muscle car that is unique and affordable, this one has to be on your go-to list. Number 5, the 1978 to 1981 Camaro and Firebirds. Now, the last of the second-gen Camaros and Firebirds are actually surprisingly affordable given how good they still look. Granted, in stock form, these cars were slow as a dog, and even the Z28s and Trans Ams were barely making 200 horsepower out of their V8s. Factory 4-speed Z28s and Trans Ams are actually starting to really creep up in price well past the 20K mark for really clean ones. Luckily, automatic or even 4-speed cars that are not Z28s or Trans Ams can still be found in the mid to high teens in really solid condition. Now, what's funny is that I actually prefer the look of the non-Z28 Camaros because they lack those front and rear fairings, which I think personally look like an afterthought rather than a carefully styled part of the car. Whether it's a Firebird or Camaro, the suspension parts underneath are all interchangeable, and there is a lot of aftermarket support available for these cars in forms of repro body panels, to interior bits, to suspension, to LS swap kits. You can pretty much find anything that you need for these cars. And funny enough, people are actually starting to build some pretty high dollar resto mods on these year cars, which means that they are reaching the point of ultimate cool factor, because you wouldn't be sinking $100,000 into one of these if it wasn't cool in your mind. So there is a chance that these actually do continue to increase in value, which is also an attractive proposition for these cars. And last but not least, number 6, the 1972 to 1976 Ford Torino. Now, closing out the list is a bit of an oddball car. I personally love the 70 to 71 Torinos, but they are a bit pricey. So the next best thing would be a 72 to 76 Torino, specifically the non-sports roof cars. The third gen Torino redesign brought with it a very different look than its predecessors, and to be honest, I think it's one that's an acquired taste. The sports roof cars were much more fastback in nature and they look awesome, but they do command a premium to where you can't reliably source an early 72 car that is a sports roof for $20,000. But you can get a formal roof car that's in really nice condition for under $20,000. Under the hood, these Torinos came with a smattering of V8s, including the 302, a 351 Cleveland, a 400, and even the 429, which means that if you're buying one as a project, you can pretty much put any period Ford motor into it and it'll fit. In terms of the formal roof cars, you definitely won't be getting a 429 in there from the factory, but a 302 or a 351 Cleveland are still very capable motors that came in those cars stock. The 351 Cleveland does have a lot less aftermarket support than the 302 does, but there still are new heads and parts available for them to hop up performance if you so choose. Now, 72 would be the year to have for the Torino because of that front end being for that year only. 73 saw the introduction of the impact bumpers and a front end restyle that, in my opinion, does look a bit worse. However, the price difference between the 2 years is night and day. 73 cars are considerably cheaper, which means that you can actually pick up a clean sports roof 1973 car inside our budget and still have a couple grand left over. Restoration parts are out there, but it's not like there's a wide selection of them like there is for Camaros and Mustangs. So it's best to buy the cleanest one possible rather than having to wait for a new old stock part to pop up for sale on eBay. And those are the 6 affordable muscle cars that you can buy all day long for under $20,000 that are weekend cruiser ready. Now, obviously, these are not the holy grail muscle cars, nor will they ever be as desirable as the ones that we all personally know and love. But where classic muscle meets affordability for the average man, I think these are some of the best affordable classic muscle cars out there to just get in and enjoy. And before everyone gets mad at me in the comments, yes, I know you can get a mid-70s C3 Corvette for under $20,000 that's really clean. I thought about putting that on the list, but again, I determined that that's not really a muscle car, so I left it off the list, but I'll throw a honorable mention in for it. But as always, thank you all for watching. Please let me know in the comments down below if there's any cars you think I missed. I'd love to hear them, and make sure to go ahead and like, share, and subscribe. It really helps me out. Until next time, enthusiasts.